The sun over Dry Hollow burned white, flattening every shadow, making the town's main street a strip of glare and heat. On the raised plank of the auction stand, Ruthie Madsen stood with her chin high, though her cheeks burned hotter than the day. A murmur ran through the crowd, men nudging each other, women smirking behind gloved hands. "Too big for a ranch hand," someone called. "Too big for a wife," another man laughed. The auctioneer, sweat slicking his forehead, rapped the gavel. "Strong back, good worker. Don't let her size fool you. Who'll start the bid?" Laughter rippled, sharper this time. Ruthie felt it in her bones, every chuckle a stone thrown. Her father stood at the edge of the platform, arms folded tight, gaze fixed anywhere but on her. He'd brought her here to be hired out for the season, to work off his debts. She knew it, and so did everyone else. A child darted through the crowd with a stick horse, shouting, "Make her pull the plow!" The auctioneer grinned at the joke, waiting for someone to speak up. And then, without warning, the crowd's murmur broke. Not in laughter, but in a kind of startled hush. A man had stepped into the open space between the stand and the hitching post. He was a head taller than most, broad in a way that made even the burly ranch hands seem wiry. His hat brim cast a clean shadow over eyes that were fixed, not on the auctioneer, but on Ruthie. Without a word, he moved to the side of the platform, swung himself up with an ease that made the boards groan, and crossed to her. His hands were bare, large, sun-browned. Before anyone could speak, he bent, slid one arm behind her knees, the other at her back, and lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all. Gasps rose from the crowd. Someone swore softly. The auctioneer's mouth opened, but no words came. Ruthie's breath caught. Her hands clutched instinctively at his shirt, the fabric smelling faintly of cedar and horse. He stepped off the platform with her in his arms, moving with a deliberate calm that dared anyone to try and stop him. At the hitching post, a massive bay gelding waited, glossy in the sun. The man set Ruthie in the saddle, adjusted the stirrup leather without looking at her, then swung up behind her in one smooth motion. His voice, when it came, was low but carried over the stunned crowd. "She rides with me." The auctioneer found his tongue. "Now see here, you can't just—" The man turned his head, and whatever the auctioneer saw there made his voice falter. "Her labor's spoken for," her father shouted, but the man didn't answer. Instead, he clicked to the gelding, and the animal stepped forward, parting the crowd. The heat seemed to bend around them as people moved aside. Whispers chased them. "Who is he? Where's he taking her?" But no one stepped in their path. Ruthie's pulse thudded in her ears. She'd never seen this man before, didn't know his name, but the steady set of his jaw told her he wasn't here on anyone else's errand. They reached the end of the street, and only then did he speak again, close to her ear. "Name's Cole Varner. If you want me to turn around, say so now." Her throat tightened. "And if I don't?" His answer was simple. "Then we keep riding until no one who laughed at you today can find you." Behind them, the sound of hurried voices rose, and Ruthie caught the glint of sunlight on metal as someone in the crowd pointed after them. The gelding's hooves struck hard against the packed dirt as Cole guided them out of Dry Hollow, past the last crooked fence posts, and into the open stretch where prairie grass swayed in the heat. Ruthie twisted in the saddle, looking back. A knot of men had spilled into the street, her father among them, shouting at the auctioneer. Two of them broke off, hurrying toward the livery. The clatter of hooves soon followed, sharp and closing. "They're coming," she said, her voice tight. Cole didn't glance back. "Of course they are. Men like that don't like having their pride stepped on in front of an audience." The gelding lengthened its stride under his subtle cue, muscles bunching and stretching with power. Ruthie felt the warmth of Cole's chest against her back, the steady weight of his arm at her side, and fought the mix of fear and bewilderment that tangled in her gut. "Where are we going?" "Far enough they can't catch us on open ground. Then we'll talk." His tone left no room for argument. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of dust and sweat from behind. She heard laughter, a hard, mean sound, from one of the riders gaining on them. "They'll take me back," she said half to herself. "Not if you sit that saddle and let me work." They crested a low rise, and the land beyond dropped into a shallow basin lined with scrub and cottonwoods. Cole angled the gelding down the slope, aiming for the tree cover. A bullet cracked somewhere behind them, the sound snapping through the air. Ruthie ducked instinctively. "Warning shot," Cole said. "They want us stopped, not dead. Yet." The gelding splashed through a narrow stream at the basin's bottom, cold water spattering Ruthie's skirt. Cole steered them into the cottonwoods, the green canopy cutting the glare and muffling the noise of pursuit. The air here smelled of damp leaves and loam, cooler on her skin. They wove through the trees until Cole slowed, listening. The hoofbeats behind them had grown fainter, confused by the maze of trunks and undergrowth. "We've got minutes, not hours," he said. "There's a game trail that'll take us north. Hard to follow unless you know it." "And you do?" "Rode it plenty. Brings you out near a line shack my family kept." They moved at a careful trot, branches brushing Ruthie's shoulders, her pulse still hammering. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Back there. You don't even know me." Cole's jaw flexed. "Didn't need to know you to see the way they were treating you. Size don't measure worth." His words landed heavier than she expected, catching somewhere deep inside. "You just decided to take me?" "I decided you weren't going to stand there 1 second longer for them to pick apart." A jay screeched overhead, making Ruthie jump. Cole's gaze swept the canopy, then the ground ahead. "Keep your eyes sharp. Men like that, they'll circle wide to cut us off." The trail narrowed, winding upward. As they climbed, Ruthie heard the distant echo of voices, fainter now, but still searching. The gelding's breathing stayed even, Cole's hands steady on the reins. "Once we reach the shack, you can decide what's next," he said. "You want to go back, I won't stop you." "And if I don't?" she asked again. He glanced down at her. "Then you're riding with me until we find someplace you can stand without being shamed for who you are." Behind them, the crack of a branch carried through the trees. Cole's eyes sharpened. "They're closer than I thought. Hold on." The gelding surged forward, and the trail ahead narrowed into a tunnel of green. The tunnel of green broke open onto a flat stretch of high meadow, the grass bending in the wind like an ocean of gold. For a moment, Ruthie thought they'd outrun the voices, until 3 riders appeared at the far edge, silhouetted against the sky. These weren't the 2 who'd chased them from town. Their gear was cleaner, their horses better fed. The man in the middle wore a coat of deep brown leather, the kind that never saw hard labor, and a wide-brimmed hat banded with silver conchos. He raised a hand, palm out, as Cole slowed the gelding. "That's far enough," the man called, his voice carrying over the meadow. "You've got someone that belongs to me." Cole's jaw tightened. "Don't reckon you're the type to buy and sell people, Nash." "You know him?" Ruthie whispered. "I know his kind," Cole murmured. Then, louder, "She's no one's property." Nash smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Her father owed me, Varner. I cleared the debt in exchange for her service. You just stole from me in front of half the town." Ruthie's stomach dropped. "That's not true," she said, but her voice caught in the wind. Nash's gaze shifted to her, slow and appraising. "Ruthie Madsen, isn't it? Strong back, season's work on my spread, roof over your head, food in your belly? That was the agreement. It was your agreement with him, she said, heat rising in her chest. Not with me. Cole eased the gelding a step closer, putting himself between Nash's stare and Ruthie. Even if her father made that bargain, she's not bound to honor it. That's not how it works out here, Nash replied, and you know it. The two men locked eyes, the air between them tightening. Cole's voice went low, even. You planning to take her by force? Nash tilted his head. Planning to collect what's mine. Same thing. One of his riders shifted in the saddle, a hand brushing the butt of his pistol. Cole's arm brushed against Ruthie's side as he adjusted his grip on the reins. We can't outrun them across open ground, he murmured. Then what? She asked. Then we stand. He raised his voice. You want her, you'll have to come get her, Nash. And you'll need to explain to the next judge why you drew on an unarmed woman in front of witnesses. Witnesses? Nash laughed. You mean your word against mine? You're forgetting whose hand the law shakes in Dry Hollow. The wind whipped between them, carrying the distant sound of a hawk's cry. Cole didn't flinch. Law or no law, you'll be digging more than fence posts if you push this, Nash. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Nash's smile returned, slow as oil spreading on water. You can keep her tonight. Tomorrow I'll take her in front of everyone, and you won't be able to stop me. He turned his horse with a jerk of the reins, his men following. Ruthie watched them disappear into the sway of the grass, her pulse hammering. Why didn't he just try to take me now? Because men like him like an audience, Cole said. He'll want to make it a show. So he's coming tomorrow? If not sooner. Cole turned the gelding toward the north ridge, eyes scanning the horizon. We've got until sundown to make sure he never gets the chance. The gelding broke into a trot, and Ruthie gripped the saddle horn, a question burning in her mind. What exactly Cole planned to do when Nash came back? Cole pushed the gelding hard toward the north ridge, the meadow grass giving way to rock-strewn slopes and low stands of cedar. The wind here smelled of sap and stone, carrying the faint rattle of loose shale under the gelding's hooves. Ruthie held on, her legs aching from the long ride, but she didn't complain. She could feel in Cole's posture that time mattered more than comfort. They crested a rise, and the land dropped into a shallow bowl, ringed by hills pocked with caves and narrow draws. Cole slowed the gelding, scanning the ridgeline before guiding them down. Line shack's just over there, he said, pointing to a squat shape half hidden by scrub. Belonged to my uncle. No one's used it in years. You think we can hide from him? Ruthie asked. Not hide, Cole said. Choose the ground we stand on. He dismounted, then reached up to help her down. Her boots hit the dirt with a thud, and she felt the ache in her knees. Cole tied off the gelding in the shade, his eyes always moving, listening for sounds that didn't belong. If Nash is coming tomorrow, why are we here now? She asked. Because we need a night to get ready, and because he might decide not to wait. The shack's door groaned on its hinges as Cole pushed it open. Dust hung in the air, the inside dim but dry. A single bunk slumped against one wall, a rusted stove squatting in the corner. Cole dropped his saddlebag on the table and began pulling out supplies. Rope, a small hammer, a tin of nails. Ruthie leaned against the doorframe, watching. What are you planning to do with those? We'll set lines along the draws, he said. Slow them down, make them pick their path instead of riding straight in. He glanced at her. And you'll be inside when they come. She straightened. Number I won't hide while you stand out there alone. His gaze met hers, steady. It's not hiding. It's staying alive so they can't use you against me. They already are, she said. He didn't argue, just went back to checking his rifle, running a cloth down the barrel. Outside, the late sun slid toward the rim of the hills, shadows stretching long across the bowl. Cole stepped out with the rope and nails, Ruthie following despite his earlier words. "Show me," she said. "Show you what?" "What you're doing. If this is my fight, too, I should know." Something in her tone made him pause. Then he handed her the rope. "Tie it between those two rocks, just high enough a horse can't see it at full gallop." She worked the knot with clumsy fingers, but it held. Cole nodded once. "Good. We'll set 3 more." As they worked, the air cooled, the sky bruising into shades of violet and rose. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote yipped, answered by another farther off. They finished the last line as the first stars pricked through. "That's all we can do tonight," Cole said, coiling the leftover rope. "Tomorrow, we hold." Ruthie's hands ached from the work, but there was a steadiness in her chest she hadn't felt at the auction. She looked at Cole, his face shadowed in the fading light. "You didn't have to take me," she said quietly. "No," he agreed, "but I couldn't leave you there." The sound of a rock tumbling down the far slope made them both turn. In the dim, a lone figure stood at the ridge, watching. Then it vanished into the dark. Ruthie barely slept, her mind replaying the shadow on the ridge, until the shapes in her dreams all wore silver-banded hats. Cole stayed outside most of the night, a dark figure against the embers of a small fire, his rifle across his knees. Just before dawn, a faint creak of leather and the muffled snort of horses pulled her from shallow rest. She sat up on the bunk, heart hammering, as Cole eased the shack door open and motioned for silence. Through the narrow crack, she saw them. 3 riders moving at a slow walk around the bowl's edge, their silhouettes barely visible in the gray light. Nash was at the front, his coat collar turned up, his head tilting as he scanned the ground. Cole whispered, "He came early. Stay low." She grabbed his sleeve. "There's not enough light for them to see the lines." "That's the point," he said, already moving to the side of the shack. The gelding shifted restlessly in the shade, sensing the tension. Outside, a metallic click broke the quiet, one of the riders drawing a rifle from its scabbard. Cole slipped into the narrow draw they'd trapped the night before. The first horse stumbled hard, its rider cursing as it lurched sideways. The second rider reined up, scanning the slope. Nash's voice carried low but sharp. "Spread out, find them." Ruthie's pulse thudded in her ears. She wanted to stay hidden, to trust Cole's plan, but the sight of Nash dismounting made her skin prickle. He moved like a man who already believed the outcome was his. Cole stepped from the cover of a cedar, rifle leveled. "That's far enough, Nash." "You had your night, Varner," Nash called back. "Time to give her up." "She's not yours to give," Cole replied. The other riders began to edge along the slope, trying to flank him. One crossed into the second draw, and the rope line snapped tight. The man hit the ground with a grunt, his horse bolting. Cole fired once, a warning shot into the dirt at the rider's feet. "Next one won't miss," he said. Nash laughed softly. "You can't hold us off forever." "Don't need forever," Cole said. "Just need you to decide she's not worth dying for." Nash's smile faded. "This is about more than her size, Varner. You think I don't see what you're doing? Making a spectacle of taking her like it's some grand act of charity?" Ruthie stepped into the doorway before she realized she was moving. "You think anyone needs charity to see you for what you are?" The words cut across the space, her voice stronger than she felt. Nash's eyes snapped to her. "You speak when spoken to, girl." "I'm not your girl," she said, "and I'm not anyone's bargain." The cubby of the shack door framed her like a stage, and she felt the weight of every eye, but she didn't look away. Cole's voice cut through. "You heard her. Now take your men and ride." Nash's jaw worked, his hands flexing at his sides. The second, rider, now on foot, muttered, "Boss, not worth it." For a moment, Ruthie thought he'd lunge forward anyway. Instead, Nash spat into the dirt. "You've made yourself an enemy, Varner." Cole didn't blink. "Add it to the list." Nash swung into the saddle, his glare raking over Ruthie once before he turned his horse. The riders pulled back into the dim light, their shapes fading into the hills. Cole didn't lower his rifle until the sound of hoofbeats had long vanished. He turned to Ruthie, eyes narrowing. "You shouldn't have stepped out." She met his gaze without flinching. "You shouldn't have had to stand there alone." The first sun broke over the ridge, painting the bowl in pale gold, but the warmth did little to ease the weight in the air. Cole paced the ground in front of the shack, scanning the hills like a man waiting for a shadow to move. Ruthie stood beside the gelding, stroking its neck to steady her own nerves. "They'll come back," she said. It wasn't a question. Cole stopped, met her eyes. "Yes, but they'll do it where they can make a scene, just like he promised." "The auction," she guessed. "Or somewhere worse. He wants the crowd." Cole's jaw worked. "That's why we're not going to let him pick the place." He went inside, pulling out his saddlebag, the rope they'd used for the tripwires, and a small pouch that jingled when it moved. Ruthie tilted her head. "What's that?" "What's going to buy us time?" he said. He didn't explain, just slung the bag over his shoulder and stepped out. "We're going back to town?" she asked, surprised. "Not the way we came. There's an old cattle road that cuts in behind Dry Hollow. We'll ride it before the sun's high." Ruthie frowned. "Why?" "Because if he wants a public fight, he's going to get one. On our terms." They set out through the North Pass, the trail narrow and shaded by scrub oak. Cole kept the gelding at a steady lope, glancing back every so often. The pouch on his hip gave the occasional muted clink, a sound that kept Ruthie curious but quiet. They stopped at a dry creek where a dead cottonwood lay fallen across the bank. Cole dismounted, tying the gelding's reins to a low branch. "Help me with this," he said, nodding to the tree's brittle limbs. Together they broke enough branches to make a rough barrier across the narrowest part of the road ahead. Cole scattered the contents of the pouch over it, small, jagged pieces of rusted iron and bent nails. "This'll slow his men if they try to follow," he said. Ruthie arched a brow. "And if they don't?" "Then we bought ourselves peace for nothing. I'll take that trade." By midday, they reached a bluff overlooking the back edge of Dry Hollow. From here, the town looked small, the main street quiet in the heat. "If we go down there," Ruthie began. "We're not going down, not yet." Cole dismounted, helping her down. He led her to a low outcrop where they could see without being seen. "Nash thinks he's going to walk you through that street with half the town watching," Cole said. "We're going to make sure when he does, the only thing they see is him being stopped." "You want to humiliate him." Cole's eyes stayed on the street. "I want him to think twice before trying this with anyone else." The wind shifted, carrying the faint sound of hooves. Ruthie's stomach tightened. "Is that—" "Not him," Cole said. "Stagecoach, right on time." Sure enough, the yellow coach rolled into view, dust pluming behind it. Cole's mouth curved into the ghost of a smile. "Good. We've got our witnesses." He turned to Ruthie. "We go in at sundown. Until then, we stay in the hills and wait for him to make his move." "And if he doesn't?" "He will," Cole said. "Men like Nash can't resist an audience." Ruthie looked back at the town, the memory of the auction's laughter still stinging. She wasn't sure if she feared the fight ahead or if, for the first time, she was ready for it. The sun was melting into the ridgeline when the first murmur swept through Dry Hollow. Folks were drifting toward the main street the way bees gather near a hive. Slow at first, then with purpose once word spread. Ruthie crouched beside Cole in the shadow of a livery shed, her heart beating faster than the fading light. "They know," she whispered. "He's making sure they do," Cole replied, his voice low but steady. Across the street, Nash strode into view, his slick dark hair catching the last gold of the sun. 4 men trailed behind him, all wearing the same smug half-smile. And between 2 of them, Ruthie's breath caught. It was her old friend Emma, wrists tied, dress torn at the hem. Cole's jaw tightened. "Leverage," he muttered. "He's baiting you with her." Nash raised his voice, speaking as if to the whole town. "I hear some folks been hiding what's mine," he said, his tone rich with false politeness. "And I don't like thieves." The crowd parted, giving him room as if he were royalty. Cole stepped forward before Ruthie could stop him, the dust whispering beneath his boots. "She's not yours, Nash," Cole said. "Never was." A few gasps rippled through the onlookers. Nash's grin widened. "There's the gallant rancher. You want her? Take her, after you buy back what she owes." He tossed a small ledger into the air, catching it with theatrical flair. "All her debts, right here. And I'll be generous. Auction starts now." Murmurs spread like fire in dry grass. Cole didn't flinch. "I'm not paying you a cent," he said, "but I'll give you something you can't buy." Nash's eyes narrowed. "And what's that?" Cole stepped closer, his voice carrying. "Your pride, in front of everyone." The crowd's attention locked on them. Nash laughed, but it rang too loud, too forced. "And if you lose?" "If I lose," Cole said, "you take me instead. Leave her, and the girl, with their lives." Ruthie's stomach twisted. This wasn't part of the plan. But before she could speak, Nash raised a hand. "Deal," he said, savoring the word. "We settle it my way. Bare hands in the street." The crowd surged forward, forming a rough circle. Cole stripped off his coat, handing it to Ruthie. "Stay at the edge. No matter what you see, don't move." "Cole, promise me." She nodded, though her throat felt tight. Nash stepped in, rolling his shoulders, his men jeering from behind the wall of townsfolk. The first blow came quick. Nash lunged, swinging wide, but Cole caught his arm, twisting until Nash stumbled. Dust rose around them as the crowd roared, the sound closing in from every side. Ruthie gripped Cole's coat like a lifeline, her eyes darting between the fight and the edge of the circle where one of Nash's men was slowly moving toward her. She glanced back at the shack beyond the street, where the gelding waited. The rope was still coiled on. The saddle. Her mind raced. Cole's plan might end Nash, but it wouldn't keep his men from finishing what he started. A sharp cry snapped her attention back, the kind of sound a crowd makes when the fight changes. Cole was on one knee, Nash's fist slamming into his ribs. Ruthie took a step forward before stopping herself. The dust swirled around them, but she could see the flicker in Cole's eyes. Not fear, not pain, but calculation. He was still in control. For now. Cole's shoulder slammed into the packed dirt as Nash's boot drove him down, the impact sending a thud through the circle of watching townsfolk. Dust clung to the sweat on his jaw, his breath coming sharp but steady. Nash leaned over him, grinning like a wolf that thought it had cornered its prey. "You've got spirit, rancher," he taunted, "but spirit don't pay debts." He swung again, but Cole rolled clear, the blow slicing air where his head had been a second before. The crowd roared, their cheers and jeers blurring together in a hot, restless hum. Ruthie stood on the edge, clutching his coat so tightly her knuckles ached. She could hear the rasp of her own breathing over the noise. Cole had told her not to move. But one of Nash's men, a tall brute with a scar like a lightning bolt down his cheek, was closing the distance between them, his hand dropping toward the knife at his hip. Emma, still bound, caught Ruthie's gaze from across the circle. Her eyes widened in warning, but Ruthie could already feel the choice closing in around her like a noose. Nash landed a glancing blow to Cole's temple, and for a moment the rancher's knees dipped. The crowd surged forward to see better, pressing Ruthie against the wall of bodies. The scarred man was almost to her now, the glint of his knife flashing in the low sun. "Stay out of it," he growled, low enough for only her to hear. "Or you're next." That was the breaking point. Ruthie dropped Cole's coat, shoving her way through the wall of onlookers. The scarred man grabbed her arm, but she twisted free, using the heel of her boot to stomp down hard on his foot. He let out a grunt, and she snatched the knife straight from his grip before he could recover. The crowd's focus was still on the fight. Nash driving Cole back, Cole feinting left, ducking under a wild swing. Ruthie circled wide, keeping low until she reached Emma. With one swift motion, she cut the rope at her friend's wrists. "Run," Ruthie whispered. But Emma didn't move. Her gaze flicked over Ruthie's shoulder, and Ruthie turned just in time to see Nash's men noticing the change, 2 breaking from the circle, heading their way. The noise of the fight swelled as Cole caught Nash's fist mid-swing, twisting hard enough to make the bigger man stumble. It was the opening Ruthie had prayed for. She darted into the circle, knife still in her hand, planting herself between Cole and Nash's advancing men. "Back off," she said, voice shaking but loud enough to cut through the noise. Nash's grin faltered at the sight of her. "You were told to stay put, girl." "And you were told to fight fair," she shot back. Cole used the moment's distraction to land a clean right hook to Nash's jaw. The man went down hard, the thud echoing like a drumbeat in the stunned silence that followed. The crowd froze, eyes bouncing between Nash sprawled in the dust and Ruthie standing over him, knife glinting in her hand. Cole straightened slowly, his chest heaving. "This ends now," he said to the men still holding their ground. "You walk away or you join him." For a long moment, no one moved. Then, one by one, Nash's men backed off, the tension in the air snapping like a brittle rope. Ruthie's grip on the knife loosened, but she didn't look away from the men until the last of them had melted into the crowd. The relief in the square was fragile, like a candle's flame in the wind. People began to murmur, their voices low, uncertain. Ruthie kept the knife at her side, her palm slick with sweat, while Cole stood over Nash's crumpled form. The big man was slow to stir, groaning as he rolled onto an elbow. Cole reached down, grabbed him by the collar, and hauled him upright just far enough to speak into his ear. "You're done here, Nash." The words were calm, but there was no mistaking the steel in them. Ruthie thought it was over, until a sharp, mocking whistle cut through the air. The sound came from the alley beyond the well, where 3 riders sat their horses, shadows stretching long in the late sun. One of them, a narrow-faced man in a black hat, had Emma's little brother, Luke, sitting in front of his saddle, a dirty rag tied over the boy's mouth. Emma gasped, a sound so raw it turned every head. Cole's body went rigid. "You let him go," he barked, taking a step forward, but the black-hatted man only smiled. "Funny thing about debt, rancher," he called out, voice carrying over the tense quiet. "It don't always get paid in coin. Sometimes it's family." He gave Luke a little jostle, making the boy whimper. Ruthie felt her stomach knot. She'd seen Cole fight angry before, but this was different. His jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack. Nash, still half bent from the punch, chuckled weakly. Thought you'd won, didn't you? He rasped, blood trailing from the corner of his mouth. But you don't win till the board's cleared. Cole shoved him away, but Nash just collapsed back into the dust, smirking through the pain. The black-hatted rider turned his horse toward the north road. If you want him back, you know where to find us. Sunrise. Bring what's owed. He jerked the reins, and the horses started moving, hooves thudding against the packed earth. Emma lunged forward, but Ruthie caught her arm. "Don't. He'll hurt him," she whispered fiercely. The riders disappeared into the narrow pass at the edge of town, their silhouettes swallowed by the darkening ridgeline. For a long, thick moment, no one spoke. Then Cole's voice broke the stillness. "We ride tonight." It wasn't a question. Ruthie shook her head. "Cole, you're bleeding. You can't just—" "I'm not letting that boy spend a night with them," he snapped, his eyes locking on hers. And in them she saw something she'd never seen before. Fear wrapped in fury. Emma stepped forward, her face pale but determined. "I'm coming with you." Cole started to protest, but Ruthie cut him off. "So am I." He stared at them both, his hands curling into fists at his sides. The crowd was thinning now, people avoiding his gaze, no one offering help. It was the way of towns like this, applause when the fight looked clean, silence when it turned ugly. Finally, he nodded once. "Then we move fast. We'll need supplies and fresh horses." He glanced at Ruthie, and his voice softened just enough to slip past her defenses. "Stay close to me. Both of you." As they moved toward the livery, Ruthie looked back over her shoulder at the empty pass, the shadows already claiming it. Somewhere out there, Luke was scared and alone, and the men holding him weren't just after payment. They wanted to break Cole. And Ruthie had the sinking feeling they knew exactly how. The night swallowed the three of them as soon as they cleared the edge of town, the faint lamplight behind them shrinking into a pinprick before vanishing entirely. The moon was a thin sliver, too shy to lend more than a ghost of light, and the trail into the pass twisted like a snake between the rock faces. Cole rode ahead, every muscle in his shoulders tight, his silhouette a dark, unyielding wall between the women and whatever lay ahead. Emma's horse stayed close to Ruthie's, their breaths visible in pale puffs that quickly vanished into the cold air. "He's just a boy," Emma whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Ruthie didn't answer. Her mind was a whirl of images, Luke's wide eyes, the smug curve of the black-hatted man's smile, the weight of the knife still strapped to her thigh. Somewhere beyond these rocks, men were holding that child like a bargaining chip, and every instinct in her screamed that they would make Cole bleed for him. They reached the first rise where the canyon walls narrowed, and Cole held up a hand. The horses stopped instantly, their ears flicking. He dismounted without a word, crouching low to study the ground. A moment later he pointed, hoofprints, fresh, cutting deep into the damp soil. "They're not far," he murmured, and his voice was so low Ruthie barely caught it. "We go on foot from here." They tethered the horses in a clump of scrub, muffling the bits with strips of cloth so no metal would catch the light. The ground was rough, littered with loose stone that shifted under their boots, and every sound seemed too loud, like the night was listening. After 100 careful steps, a faint orange glow appeared ahead, flickering against the canyon wall. The smell of wood smoke followed, tinged with something sharper. Cheap whiskey. Cole's hand shot out, stopping both women, his eyes locked on Ruthie. "Stay behind me. No matter what happens, you don't move unless I tell you." She nodded, though her fingers tightened around the hilt of the knife. They edged closer until the glow became a fire pit, ringed by 3 men. Luke sat on the ground near the flames, his hands tied in front of him, the gag still in place. The black-hatted man lounged in a camp chair, boots propped on a crate, a rifle across his lap. Another man, tall, thin, with a face like dried leather, was pacing, muttering something Ruthie couldn't catch. Cole took a slow step forward, and the pacing man froze mid-stride. "Evening," Cole said, his voice calm, but the air around him crackled with danger. The black-hatted man grinned. "You came. Wasn't sure you had the spine for it." "Let the boy go," Cole replied, ignoring the bait. "I brought what you wanted." He reached into his coat and drew out a heavy pouch, the kind that clinked when it moved. The black-hatted man's eyes flickered to it, greedy and quick, but instead of standing, he leaned back further in the chair. "Maybe I want more now," he said, letting the words draw out slow. "Maybe I think that boy's worth more than coin." Luke whimpered, and Ruthie felt her pulse hammer in her throat. Cole's jaw tightened, and for a second Ruthie thought he might lunge right then, but instead he shifted the pouch in his hand, letting the coins inside chime. "Then come take it," he said. The black-hatted man's smile faltered just enough for Ruthie to see it. He wasn't expecting Cole to call his bluff. And in that single heartbeat, Ruthie knew something was about to break. The black-hatted man's grin returned, slow and deliberate, but there was a flicker of calculation behind his eyes now. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, the rifle still cradled in his hands. "You're bold, Cole," he said, voice dripping with false amusement. "But bold men tend to die young out here." The pacing man had stopped entirely, his eyes darting between the pouch of coins and Cole's steady stance. Emma, still in the shadows, clutched Ruthie's sleeve so tightly it hurt. But Ruthie didn't flinch. She was watching Cole's shoulders, the subtle coil in his stance that meant he was ready to move. Cole took one more deliberate step forward, closing the gap until the firelight painted one side of his face in gold and left the other in darkness. "You've got until I count to 3 to hand me that boy," he said, voice low but sharp enough to cut the air. 1. The pacing man's hand twitched toward his hip. Ruthie's heart slammed in her chest. 2. The black-hatted man's rifle began to lift, slow, like he was savoring the moment. That's when Luke made a sound, a muffled cry that was half sob, half plea, and it snapped something in Ruthie clean in two. She moved before she could think, stepping out from the shadows into the firelight, the knife in her hand flashing like a shard of moonlight. 3, Cole finished, and in the same breath, chaos erupted. Cole lunged left, knocking the rifle's barrel skyward just as it fired, the shot splitting the night and scattering the horses tethered far behind. The pacing man swung toward Ruthie, but she was already inside his reach, the blade biting across his arm. He howled and stumbled back, clutching the wound. Emma darted to Luke, dropping to her knees to saw at the ropes with her own small knife. "Hold still, sweetheart," she whispered, her voice shaking. Luke's eyes were wide, fixed on the blur of motion as Cole and the black-hatted man crashed to the ground, fists and elbows driving into ribs and jaws. The third man, short, wiry, with a scar bisecting his lip, burst from the shadows near a wagon, a pistol in hand. Ruthie spun toward him, but before she could act, Cole shoved the black-hatted man into the fire pit, sending sparks exploding upward. In that flash of light, Ruthie hurled her knife, not at the man, but at the pistol. The blade smacked the weapon from his hand, sending it skittering into the dirt. "Go!" Cole shouted, scooping Luke into his arms as Emma scrambled up beside him. Ruthie grabbed the coin pouch, slinging it over her shoulder. If these men wanted blood, they weren't getting payment, too. Behind them, the black-hatted man clawed his way out of the fire, his coat smoking, eyes promising a vengeance that would stretch for miles. They bolted into the darkness, feet pounding the rocky ground until they reached the horses. Cole set Luke on the saddle in front of Emma, swung up behind Ruthie on the second, "Mount!" and kicked hard. The canyon swallowed the sound of pursuit, their hoofbeats echoing off the walls until the campfire's glow vanished completely behind them. Only when the wind off the pass hit her face did Ruthie realize she was trembling. Not from fear, but from the wild rush of having faced death and chosen to run toward it instead of away. Cole's arm tightened around her, steady and sure. "You did good," he murmured, so softly she almost didn't hear. But in the back of her mind, Ruthie knew this wasn't over. Men like the black-hatted one didn't forgive. They waited. And somewhere out there in the night, he was already planning his next move. By the time the first gray threads of dawn crept over the canyon rim, they had put miles between themselves and the camp. The horses moved slower now, steam rising from their flanks, but none of them complained. Ruthie rode in front of Cole, the coin pouch resting against her hip, and though every muscle ached, she kept her head high. Behind them, Emma still had Luke in her arms, the boy's head nestled against her chest, finally sleeping after the long, terror-filled night. They reached a small rise where the land opened into a valley patched with frost and morning mist. Cole slowed the horses and finally pulled them to a stop. The stillness after so many hours of flight was almost startling. Ruthie slid down, her legs stiff, and stepped a few paces away, letting the cold air wash over her. For the first time since this began, she allowed herself to really look at Luke, alive, safe, his small hands curled into Emma's shawl. Cole dismounted and came to stand beside her. "They won't stop, you know," he said quietly, scanning the horizon. "Men like that, they don't let go." Ruthie's jaw tightened. "Then they'll find out I don't either." There was no tremor in her voice now, no hesitation. She'd found something in herself she didn't know existed, something stronger than fear. Emma slid down from her horse, still holding Luke, and walked to them. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice fragile. Cole looked from Emma to Ruthie. "We find somewhere safe. Not just for a night. For good." He glanced at Ruthie, and she understood the unspoken part. Safety wasn't just about walls. It was about people who would fight for each other, no matter what came. Ruthie knelt in front of Luke. When his sleepy eyes blinked open, she brushed a strand of hair from his face. "You're with us now," she told him softly. "We'll take care of you, always." The boy studied her for a long moment before whispering, "Promise?" Ruthie smiled, the first true smile she'd managed in days. "Promise." They shared what little food they had left, dry biscuits and a strip of jerky, before mounting again. Cole led them toward the tree line, where a thin ribbon of smoke rose from somewhere far off. As the sun climbed higher, painting the valley gold, Ruthie found herself looking ahead instead of back. She thought of the black-hatted man's eyes, the rage in them, and felt no shiver this time. If he came again, they would be ready. Near midday, they reached a small, weathered cabin tucked between the pines. Its roof sagged a little, and the porch steps creaked, but the door stood open as if waiting for them. Cole swung down and tested the floorboards inside, nodding once. "It'll hold," he said. "With a little work, it could be home." Emma carried Luke in and laid him on a blanket by the hearth. Ruthie lingered on the threshold, watching the light spill across the rough-hewn walls. She felt Cole's presence beside her before he spoke. "You could go," he said quietly. "No one would blame you." Ruthie shook her head. "I've had enough of running." He studied her for a moment, then offered a hand. Not as a rescuer, not as a man claiming something, but as an equal. She took it. Together they stepped into the cabin. The door closed against the cold, and outside, the valley lay quiet under the winter sun. Please like, share, and subscribe to support more true-hearted Echoes of the West. If you had been there when Ruthie stepped out of the shadows, would you have taken that risk too? Tell us in the comments.